Yeah, good.
I've got headphones in, so there's not a lot of feedback.
Yeah.
Bear with me a second.
So you were working late last night?
Oh yes, I was. I was. I had probably the most vivid dream I've ever had in my entire life. Very different experience to what I'm used to. So, you know,
Well, let's
I
hear
just
it,
thought
man.
I thought it'd be interesting for channel,
Yeah.
something
So I'm
crazy.
I'm recording this now. So
All right, okay. Yeah, sorry guys. I've literally just woke up, which is why I wanted to, have a chat with Aaron about this while it was still fresh in the mind. So basically, I was up late last night to maybe probably about 4 o'clock. I was up working on the website because that's how much I love everyone. And I got to sleep, and basically, I found myself this dream. I was in a high-rise building, and in this high-rise building, we were sat on these kind of like brown leather couches in this cafe, which was about two-thirds of the way up in this building. It was really vivid. I remember I was sat there talking to some strangers that I didn't know, and there was me and my son. And my son was around anything from 4 to 6 in this experience. And
when he's an actual fact about 4 years old now?
he's 4 years old now, so I
Yeah.
couldn't really put an age on him. He was still quite young, and he still needed looking after. And I remember pointing out we could see the ocean. You could see like the rest of the cafe floor across this square central room in this high-rise building, and you could see the cafe window, big open bay windows on the outside, and there was these ocean waves. I remember just how blue the water was, kind of a darkish blue look to it. It was almost sundown. So I remember that time of day where it gets a little bit dull.
Yeah.
And I pointed out to Kai. I says, "Hey, Kai." I says, "Look at the waves. Look how big those waves are outside like this." And he's like, "Oh yeah, Daddy." And my dad was with me in this place, and he was outside of the building exploring. He was somewhere else doing something. I don't know what he was doing. I think he could have been shopping or anything. I don't know. And all of a sudden, I remember the second wave that came got slightly larger, and I'm thinking, oh, okay, that's weird. It's a bit of a big wave, and I pointed it out to Kai. I said, "Look how big those waves are. Look at the surfers over there, and look at the boats," and pointing it out. And he found it fascinating. Then all of a sudden, I remember seeing the ocean being pulled outwards. It just emptied. Almost, you could see the fish laid out on the like. It was weird, and I remember seeing like these boats just sat in the sand, and all the water's just like this out, and I was like, okay, that's not good. And I remember thinking, okay, there's a tsunami hitting, and there was earthquakes. You could feel the tremors in the buildings, and I remember thinking, crap, where's my dad? Okay, this is a high building. We should be fine in this building. So I got Kai, we ran into the stairwell. There was mass panic, and everybody was running to the top of the building to get as high as possible in case the wave hit the side of the building. So I got him in this kind of stairwell, and I left him there, and I says, "Kai, you need to stay here. I'm going to go find your granddad." I says, "You need to stay here." And some strangers was with us, and they said, "Don't worry, we'll look after him. You go and get what you need to get." So I run down the building, all down these flights of stairs. I got outside of the building. I found my dad, and I'm like, "Dad, run!" And he's running behind me, and I was running as fast as I could. As I was running, there was bits of concrete, big shards of concrete and things just smashing on the ground in front of me. You could see like the water, like pools of water coming in front. I looked around, and my dad had completely disappeared, like something had just got him. And I was like, at this point, it started just feeling so real. You couldn't imagine. I remember looking up into the sky, and you could see it was just cloudy, and you could see the edge of the wave. There were boats that were just kind of on the side like this against the wave, and it was just moving incredibly fast. And at this point, I realised that the building that I'd left my son in, I wasn't getting back to it in time, and B, the wave was much higher than the building. And I remember standing there and watching it just obliterate the building, knowing that it's just destroyed the only thing that I live for. And as a result, all of the stuff that the wave was pushing in front of it, all this like cars and shit flying in front of me, and it just obliterated me. And I woke up, and as I woke up, I was I was absolutely panicked and terrified. It was so vivid. I was in tears. I'll be honest with you. I was in tears when I woke up. It was like it felt like a vision. It didn't feel like a dream. It just felt like something was trying to tell me something, and I just thought I'd share that with you all to see what you made of it. basically.
Prophecy dreams and catastrophe dreams.
It felt like the Akasha. I mean, that's what it felt like. I've been Googling it for a little while before I talked to you, and there's a guy that named his channel called Tsunami Dream. And what was interesting is that everything that was happening was coming from the left. And this guy dreamt that his tsunami was coming from the left, and he had quite a few similar kind of scenarios in it, only he was out in the ocean. So I don't know.
Okay, so when we look at dreams then and we try to interpret them, we have to look at all the words that we use very, very closely. And so this is why we have to write them down, because when we write them down and we look at the words that we use and then we do kind of like a thesaurus on each word to see what other words to build up a greater picture of what we're trying to say. But the words in which we use are really, really important, because sometimes we'll find that we use words that we wouldn't really use in our everyday language. And so when you check out the thesaurus and you look deeper into what that word means, then it'll give you more of an understanding. And so when you woke up from it and you felt absolutely terrified and real, you say you felt like it was like you was in the Akashic Records, like you was in what? Do you think you was in another dimension where that happened, or?
I can't really speculate on that. What I felt like was there was a big difference between a lot of my dreams to this one. It felt as vivid as when I have an astral projection, for instance, but I was unaware that I wasn't there. I thought that what was happening was actually happening in this dream. I never realized I was just dreaming. I mean, that's usually the case for most dreams, until you become conscious in the dream. But what was very interesting about it is that, okay, most dreams, when you are unconscious, things seem very strange when you wake up. Like things kind of don't make sense to a lot of things. And you get this, you kind of know it's a dream. This was like being somewhere else, and it actually happened, and every single tiny little micro detail of the dream made absolute sense. Like it was, there wasn't any weird stuff that was happening. There was a reason behind everything. There was a causal reason behind it all. So it was literally like, and even the way that the wave worked, the physics of it, the physics of the dream was just like it would actually happen. I've seen videos of huge like waves and things I've watched these documentaries where they talk about these mega tsunamis. If one was to ever happen, then maybe that information stored in the brain from seeing these documentaries. I don't know, but it just felt so vivid and so real, like it was trying to scream out a message.
Let me just sort of run a few things by you then. From what I'm picking up now, when you were speaking about this other guy that's got this tsunami channel, and he says that everything's coming from the left, what do you glean from that?
I don't know, because the left can change depending on which direction you stood in. So it could be there, it could be there.
Well, yeah, but it's for a reason. You see, if you're intuitively, instinctively thinking that something coming from the left, well, we know. I'm where is left, because I can be moving around like this and reorientating myself, and you can say to yourself, well, this is the left, and so wherever you are, then whatever it is going to be coming. But what I'm going to be suggesting here that it was making reference to the left brain. And so the left brain is the logical side of the brain. And so there could be something in that. The other thing is, when we look at dreams, we have to look at the masculine and the feminine as well as everything else. Now, obviously, a very, very tall high-rise building is a phallus. It's very masculine. And because it's built out of concrete and it's all logic-based, because it's all math and science, then you've got that left-hand brain thing again. With the massive wave coming in, that's water, and that's a right-hand brain thing, because that's Mother Earth, it's a feminine thing, it's intuition, and all these sort of things. And so when we start picking pieces like this, then we can get a greater picture. Also, what the scenario depicted was the son and the father, and you're in between, so you've got 3 generations going on. And so, you see, all dreams, it's not about what they depict, it's about the metaphor which is involved in everything, because this is how the dream communicates with us. It's through metaphor. And so if you look at it from that perspective, then you've got like insecurity going on with the young and insecurity going on with the old. And so you're trying to protect your son on the one hand, and then your attention is diverted because you want to protect your father. In the end, you don't end up protecting any of them. They both get swept up with the tsunami. But what about you? Did you perish in the tsunami or no?
I woke up as the wave hit me, so there was no way of escaping it. Your video's frozen there, mate, if you want to restart that. But yeah, I'll keep talking. So basically, it's interesting about what you said about the left, because when the event started happening, right, the waves were on the right, kind of off to the right, and when I was talking to Kai and coercing with Kai, and this was kind of on the right, and then everything sort of switched to the left then, if that makes sense. So the loving and the connection and things was all right brain maybe, and the left brain and the chaos and all that kind of stuff was left brain maybe. I don't know. So
yeah,
so I just thought I'd share that, because I think that's the first time I've had a dream like that was so vivid, so like it was definitely trying to make a point, whatever that was. And when I speak of the Akasha, I believe that the Akasha is everything. It's the subconscious mind, it's thought, it's everything that we experience. And you look at people like Nostradamus and people that are able to have visions in the Akasha, and I think that's where dreams exist anyway. I think that's where all experience exists. And maybe it's possible that there's so many different cataclysmic events that could cause a tsunami wave like this. It could be nuclear bombs, it could be an asteroid hitting Earth, it could be Earth crust displacement, a pole shift. There's so many different things. In fact, pretty much anything other than a virus that could cause the apocalypse, essentially, would probably cause a wave like that.
But these apocalyptic dreams, they're very, very prevalent in the human psyche. Let me just run by one that I had, which was absolutely very profound, and this was about 4 years ago. Okay. And it was very, very vivid, just like you say, that they're very special, these dreams are, because they are kind of like an astral projection. Everything is absolutely real. And so what happened is, I was sitting in this house, and I'd noticed outside that it started to get dark. And I was thinking to myself, well, I could see the moon outside. And the moon was getting larger and larger and larger until, in the end, I was looking out at the window and thinking, it's going to come to hit the earth. And so I bent down to tie my shoelaces up, and I was tying my shoelaces up, and this was quite a methodical thing to do. And I get the suggestion that this was preparation that I need to do in my life. I need to get things in order. So I was tying my shoelaces very proper. You see, if you're seeing the moon coming to impact the earth and there's a major catastrophe and we're all going to die, shoelaces being tied isn't really that important. And so that's one aspect of it. And so the other thing was then, what came to my mind is that I need to be with my daughter when this happens. And so I tied my shoelaces up and went outside, and I'm on my way to go to meet my daughter, and the moon is absolutely graphic and it's massive. And then my daughter, she comes skating down the pathway, and she's about 12 years old. She's got her pigtails in, and she's like, "Dad," and I'm like, "Yeah, look at the moon." She's, "Wow, is it going to come to hit the earth?" And I'm like, "Yeah, I think so." And so I said, "Well, let's go and watch it then," because I'm always of the frame of mind that whatever catastrophe befalls the world, then we have been privy to experience that. I'm not afraid of anything happening, Guy. I will take everything in my stride, and I will look at it and I'll think, well, how many other people have seen the end of the world? And so in view of the fact that we are in this belief system, that we don't actually die eternally in any case, we're just having some sort of a dream experience, I'm like, well, okay, let's dream the dream.
See, for me in the dream, I wasn't concerned for my own life. I was concerned about saving my dad and my son. I didn't care about myself, and that was the interesting thing, because it was so real. It was like, oh God, I was being like a bit of a hero, essentially. But I do remember in the dream, now you mention it, strangely enough, having a similar kind of thought about the catastrophe, about, there's no way we can escape this. Do we just submit to it, or is there a chance? And my chance was, maybe this building's high enough. So I was going to get my dad, we were going to run to this building, get to the top of this building and wait for the wave to hit, and hopefully just hold on just enough until the wave passed, and then we'd be fine. It turned out that the wave was much bigger than I anticipated. So I remember thinking in the dream, this wave is much bigger than I have anticipated. And then my dad went missing. I realized that he was obliterated. My son went missing, and I was left there, and then poof, I was gone too.
Okay,
so what metaphor is that sending?
Let me interject here, because the language that we use is very, very important. You see, when you're depicting the dream, as I've said, the dream doesn't have any significance. It's the thoughts that are behind it. And so you were feeling that there's nothing that you can do. This is out of control, and this is a major catastrophe.
Yeah.
And so if you look at your life then, if you ask yourself the question, well, how in control do you feel? What is it that has been a major catastrophe in your life currently? What do you think could be potentially a major catastrophe? And so look at all the aspects of catastrophe in your life. Look at all the aspects which you think are out of your control. The wave was absolutely huge and awesome, and there's nothing you can do about it. So this is the kind of the connotations of impending doom.
So beautiful as well, though, in a way. It was very beautiful.
Yeah,
I get what you're saying.
Well, you see, the beauty comes out of the femininity side of it. You see, if Freud was to look at this dream, I'm pretty sure then he would have the connection with the masculine and the feminine, because they're very, very prominent there. The only thing that you don't have depicted is like a well or a cavern, which would indicate the pussy. You've got the phallus there, and you see everything in the human consciousness which pertains to this long, proportionately slender thing is phallic. Well, the stairwell could be that's it. That's the feminine aspect of it.
Because that's where I thought the safety would have been lying.
Yeah. Okay. So therefore, you're going down. You see, that's very important. Whether you're going up and whether you're going down. Now,
I was taking my beloved people up the stairwell as high as possible, but I had to go down it to get outside to get my dad.
Okay, very interesting. Now, you see, you are wanting to ascend, you're wanting to take your beloved people on your ascension, because that's what we're about here, but we're struggling to take them on the ascension because it's very, very difficult. And if they don't have the time, and this is why you couldn't find your father, because your father's never going to ascend.
That makes sense.
So therefore, you couldn't get him up to the top. But when you went down, what you were doing then is you were going down into the unconscious of yourself. You was delving deeper into your psyche, and that's how it works in Jungian terms with the depth levels of psyche. If you're ever going down into a basement, you're going down into the archaic, you're going down into the history, you're going down into your past, you're going down into the deeper regions of what it is to be a human being. If you're going up into the attic, then you're raising up into the higher levels of consciousness and the greater aspects of ascension. And you see, if you're in a lighthouse, if you're in a castle, if you're in a tall building, then you've got greater vision and greater clarity, you see. When you're in a basement, you're in the dark.
Right, okay, I'm not going to jump onto other dreams, but it's interesting that you said that, because I had a dream before where I was in this house and I tried to climb these stairs, and there's an old lady at the top of the stairs that said, "You're not ready to come up here yet."
There you go then.
So that's interesting, because maybe there's something that I'm in my subconscious, my psyche, that's stopping me from taking that next step in my own ascension. So, or maybe I'm placing my own limitations on there. So, I've had tsunami dreams before, but never like this one. Never as vivid as this one. So it seems to be making.
Just let me interject here again. You see, you say that you place in your own restrictions. What was the word you used?
Maybe, maybe I'm placing restrictions on my own ascension. I don't.
Yeah, you see, this is part of your psyche, and it derives out of the relationship that you've been in. Because, not to get too personal here, because it's
I understand. That's
but
fine.
You felt that you were stifled by that, and so therefore she imposed upon you a certain feeling that you were inadequate in certain realms. You weren't living up to her expectations. So what that did is that brought about your self-doubt. And you do carry the self-doubt. And you've had self-doubt issues for a long, long time, haven't you, which stem from your childhood.
True. Yeah, that's true.
And so you're in a position now whereby you've got freedom, but obviously this freedom brings about insecurity. And this is why people don't like it, Guy. They don't like freedom because what it does is it opens up the whole world to potential. And people don't like potential because there's too much choice there and there's too much insecurity. If you are kept governed in narrow parameters, all these things are for other people. You know, thinking about achieving this and about achieving that, and what if I, now the world's my oyster, what am I going to do? But then it's kind of like, I'm too afraid to go climbing mountains and doing all this sort of thing, and so therefore we impose our own restrictions upon us. And this is why the human nature is so happy in its own enslavement now. It couldn't be like this, Guy, if it wasn't for the intrinsic reality of the human being that we are a fear-based creature. And so when anybody offers us security, we're prepared to take that and we'll exchange our freedom for it.
Yeah, and it's always about, in these dreams, if I could just find a way to get up there above the wave, if I could just find a way to climb these stairs or whatever, it's always like, if I could just find a way. But really, by thinking that, that's placing a restriction on that too. So I just find that quite interesting. Yeah.
And so if you wanted to look into it more deeply, then I would write it down while it's still fresh in your mind, because what you'll discover is that more and more will come out of it because you'll remember more. And then what you do is once you've wrote out the whole dream, you pick out all the emotive words, all the words that are pertaining to your emotions. And then you pick out all the words which are pertaining to logic, and then to the feminine and the masculine. And you look at this, and then you start to glean the full psychological picture, because we've just spoken about the feminine and the masculine. That's very plain. We've just spoke about the insecurity, which your position in life now. You're wondering, you're single again, and you're wondering about your business. You've got another proposition, and then you're doing this venture, and you're wondering where it's all leading and everything like this. And so it's very, very fascinating when you start to do that. And every dream that I used to interpret, it used to take me at least an hour to get things worked out. But at the end of it, what it does is it shows you a mirror reflection of your current psyche.
Yeah, I'm going to do that actually. I find it quite interesting. I have a trip book actually, where I used to put my psychedelic trips in, and I'm going to start putting dreams in there as well, because it's the same thing really, in a sense. And I'm going to do that. And I think as well, actually, I might put a dream section up on the forum of this website.
That'd be great. Because people can write their dreams, and we'll ask them to write them as methodically as they possibly can, and then we can have a go at interpreting them, which would be great. Cool. So the other thing is that you mentioned that you had an astral projection the other night. Do you think that would be good to include into this?
Yes, definitely it would, yes. Okay, right. And I remember this because there's no way I could not remember this. It wasn't really much in terms of a lengthy experience, but the experience itself was very different to what I'm used to. So I was sleeping, and I was basically in this kaleidoscope room.
Well, let me just interject again here. This is very, very poignant, because you just said I was sleeping, and the instant thought which came to my mind was, well, evidently, because that's when you astral project. But I've had an astral projection when I was wide awake.
Okay, so you kind of induced it from the waking state, or?
Yeah, because all my astral projections, well, I say all of them, predominantly, because you can slip into an astral projection via your dream. Because when you're dreaming, your unconscious carries over, and because it's your intention, then your dream is creating stuff. And I've woke up many a time in the vibrations. And also, what I've done is I've woke up having had like a dream of an astral projection, and I could never discern which one it was, because it was an astral projection as far as I could could see, but I consciously never went into it. I wasn't conscious when my body went through the vibrations and I slipped out of my body, metaphorically speaking. And so there's lots of varying ways in which we can have an astral projection. But
yeah, I mean, I've had consciously induced astral projections through meditation, and got through the vibrational stage and managed to, have an experience there. And but most of them come from when I realise that I'm dreaming, and then I go into a lucid dream, and then from the lucid dream, I will myself to have an astral projection, and then vibrations. This time I was this part of the astral projection was it was a lucid dream, because I was in this room, this kaleidoscope room, right, and there were these stairs in this room. Now imagine that
when you say kaleidoscope room, can you explain that?
Okay, I'll try and explain
this is the whole thing about dream interpretation and astral projections, because if you just leave it at that, then people are thinking, well, what does he mean? When I thought of a kaleidoscope, obviously I think of this a child's kaleidoscope, and you've got like a DMT experience going on.
Yes,
you've got this
exactly.
mandala, and you've got all these shapes which seem to be growing out of itself like fractals.
Yeah, it was all fractal based. It was reds, whites, greens, and just glowing. And like there were these, I was stood like 2/3 down this staircase, so I knew that there was something behind me, and the staircase was at least 2/3 down. I could see a couple of steps in front of me, and I was trying to take the last couple of steps into this kaleidoscope room, and everything was just like moving and warping with inside each other, like the patterns on the floor. Now, have you ever seen the film Doctor Strange, where the hallways and shit move and stuff? I don't know if you've ever seen it. Some of you viewers might have seen this.
Yeah.
It was like that, but the room was it was like a digital space. It was like a very digitized and very kaleidoscopy, and everything was all the same kaleidoscope colors. And I was in there, but it felt nauseous. I actually genuinely felt sick in the room. And I remember thinking that I was dizzy and I was off balance, because there was so much stuff going off in this room that it was just throwing my vision and my senses out.
Yeah.
And as soon as my vision and my senses were being thrown out, I realized I was dreaming, right? And then all of a sudden I was laid in bed experiencing the vibrations, and these vibrations came on. And I was sleeping next to my new girlfriend, and she turned around to me and she said, "Are you okay? Because you've been talking in your sleep." And as she said that, "Are you okay?" I was in the corner of the room watching her speak to me on the bed.
Right.
And I was stood there observing it, and then she says, "Are you okay?" And then all of a sudden it was like a phase shift, and I woke up and I was in bed again next to her. And she genuinely said something. She had said something and remembered saying it, but I literally observed her saying something to me whilst I was the point of perception in the room looking back at myself.
Right.
I just found that fascinating, because it's kind of, to me on a personal level, it proves that that consciousness can observe things non-locally, and like
yes.
And that's kind of it was an interesting experience because of how tuned in it was and how hyper tuned, how real it felt, and so I just thought I'd include that.
Yeah, and so if we look at it as a dream then, which initially it was, then it started out kaleidoscopic. And so life is a tapestry of feelings and experiences and thoughts and all this sort of thing. And so if you're in this region, which is all kaleidoscopic and it's very fractal orientated, and you are feeling that your senses have lost control of the actual environment. Now, this is something that's really important when you start to get involved in psychedelics and everything, because you look around the world and you think, well, I mean, you have to question everything, don't you? You question your reality, you question this reality, and you can start to think that, well, this is just a dream. And there's no point in my senses perceiving all this stuff. There's no point in me being affected by all this stuff, because it's a non-reality. And so there is a potential that we can slip into a variety of, what's the right word for being in a realm where we don't really care, and it's not a bad thing. It's just that we're so calm in the level of acceptance that everything's going on around us. I can't think of that word, but you know what I'm feeling here.
Yeah,
And so
yeah.
what I get like is when I go into the city, I'm on a train and I'm looking around at all the automata. I just think like, what is happening here? This is bizarre. I've come into a realm of robots, and I'm a human being, and these things are not human. And so when you start to think like that, it gets into this whole solipsism business whereby you're thinking you're the only real consciousness that actually exists. And this is the beautiful thing about what we're doing here now, is because we are finding 1 in a million consciousnesses which are in the same vibration as us. And so it's kind of like, thank God, I'm not alone. Because if I sat on this train and I looked at the world, if I walked through London or any other city, then there's a potential that you can feel very, very alone because you're so detached from all that stuff which just doesn't seem relevant at all.
Yeah, yeah, it's interesting. Another point to make as well is that you know, when you do the DMT and you break through onto the other side, and the kind of realms that you experience on the other side is that kaleidoscope room was very familiar to me, because it was like, although it was so like disoriented, it was very familiar to me because it felt like it didn't feel like this dimension. It felt like I'd been there before on DMT. Let's put it that way.
Yeah.
And then all of a sudden, I was just boom thrown into into these vibrations, and then a separation of consciousness from the body. So, is this place? Is this mental construct essentially what it is? Is that the very last kind of breakdown, the kaleidoscope room of reality before consciousness separates from the body? I mean, is that what that's showing me there? And also within that space there's a lot of subconscious information that, you know, I guess like Jung and people like this could talk about, with the masculine, the feminine, the you know, all this kind of stuff that you've been mentioning. Maybe that's the very deepest depths of the subconscious before consciousness separates, and maybe, I don't know. I'm still discovering this, you know, and you know, just when I think that I've got a good grasp on reality and a good grasp on other realities, for instance, through psychedelics and through astral projection, something new just pops up, and I'm thinking, you know, I'm going to write this book now. Then all these new questions keep popping up, and like,
This is the beauty of the complexity of this thing we exist within consciousness, you see, because what it appears to me is, and this is what quantum physicists say, as you'll know, that when they find the smallest particle, they think, oh, that must be it then now, i.e. when they've found quarks and other particles pertaining to the atom. And you see, when you got the atom, and then you've got the electrons and the proton and the positron, then you think, well, that's it then. They're the smallest particles. But these can be broken down into quarks, or into threes, and then they, in turn, can join other quarks. When they hit into each other, one part separates, another part joins on, and all this sort of thing. And so what they've said is then, it appears what this quantum world is, that via consciousness looking for something, then consciousness itself will create. And so we will never ever find the fundamental basis of the universe, because consciousness is the creator. And as long as we have an imagination, the imagination is creating. And so therefore, you see, if you look at every single thing that the human's done, Guy, it's created it and it's experienced it via its imagination.
Yeah.
And so if you look at rockets going to Mars and all this sort of thing, then that stemmed from human imagination. And so if you look at the absolute fantastic astral projection, for instance, that stems out of the imagination.
It does. You have to be in a state of imagination. You know?
Yes. Now, when you see the way in which you have an astral projection is that you lie in bed absolutely, completely rigid, not rigid, relaxed, static. You don't blink, you don't scratch, you don't do nothing. Effectively, your body dies. And then when your body gets into this level of consciousness whereby it's out of sorts with itself, because your consciousness is still there, and yet the body feels like it's asleep. The body is asleep. So the consciousness goes, hang on, what's going on here? Something strange going on. So when you are in that level of strangeness, that is then when your consciousness, you can say to yourself, I want to leave the body now, and you do. you go through these vibrations, and your consciousness exits your body. And so,
Aye.
isn't it absolutely incredible how
It's
the
incredible.
imagination will actually produce what you desire?
It's incredible, but the question for me is, when one person dies, does that same thing happen? And does it go on forever? Are you part of the Akasha, essentially? That's interesting. I think that's an interesting thing, because, like, you know, maybe that's what everything is, and maybe that's what does happen, as well as a number of other things. Maybe it's a multiple perspective that you get upon death. Maybe you become consciousness itself that can experience all points, all angles, all perspectives, all this kind of stuff. Because you know, if you look at the nature of time, I mean, time doesn't exist. You know, just because you watch clicks around and you appear to get older when you look in the mirror, it's all illusory. So, you know, if you look at the nature of time, all energy, all possibility that ever could have been, ever will be, and ever, you know, is happening right now, happens in a singularity, a single frame. So that means there's no such thing as birth, there's no such thing as life, there's no such thing as death. There's only an experience. So maybe our energy, our experience moves from form to form within this cycling of this quantum snapshot of time, this present moment, essentially. And I think that there's a big link between that and these experiences that people are having. You know, the Egyptians knew about it. The many different cultures around the world.
The Buddhists, they knew all about it, and so they've both got their Book of the Dead. This is really interesting, because I was speaking to Coffee and Conspiracy last night in the video, which is a great video, by the way, if you get time to watch that.
I'm going to watch that today, yeah.
And I was talking about the imagination aspect of the human being. And when you look at all of these facets of the imagination, then you can see that we, in actual fact, when we look closely, create our reality. We think we don't if we don't concentrate on it, and if we don't analyze ourselves. We think we're just being moved by forces beyond our control. But the vast majority of what is going on, we are creating it via our own consciousness and by the experiences that we've had before and our belief systems. Now, something really important. And there's this guy called Robert Wagner. You're probably familiar with him.
Yeah.
He's wrote a great lucid dream book. And what he said is that when he was in his lucid dreams, and he would say to himself, well, I want to go and see my mother now because my mother died a couple of years ago and I miss her. And so he goes to see his mother. And when he gets to his mother, she's living in the same house. She's still got the same cat. And when he walks through the door, she acts exactly the same as she did when she was alive. All right, son, want a cup of tea? She starts doing this old tea ritual like grannies used to do with the tea caddy and the little tea set and all that. And so what he deduced from that was that because her belief system was so narrow, then she didn't believe in the afterlife or any of this paranormal. And so her belief system in this human form was then carried on into her belief system in the afterlife. She didn't know she was dead. She was existing in the paranormal, the after-death environment, just as she was here on Earth. But you see, when people have a vision, for instance, if they're steeped in Christianity, when they have a near-death experience, they start seeing this white light, and then they start seeing Jesus draped in his beautiful white cloth and all this sort of thing. If you believe in Allah, for instance, then you're going to have something along that nature. Now, what I was speaking with Paul in relation to, I was talking about the psychedelics. When you take ayahuasca in the Amazon jungle, invariably, the indigenous people in particular, they will see the snake. And they will see the Black Panther. These aspects of femininity, which is Mother Ayahuasca, they are deep-rooted in the collective consciousness of that region. And I said, well, when the Egyptians had all these astral projections and everything, it appeared to me that they saw all those figures which were in their folklore and in their collective consciousness. And I was saying, well, do you think this variety of stuff travels? On some cases it does, but I'm pretty sure. And the reason why I'm saying this is because when I took Amanita muscaria, I had this what's called lycanthropy. And this lycanthropy...
Yeah, I've read about that. You're not the only person that gets that.
Yeah, apparently. No, and so this is very, very curious because I felt like I was a wolf. I was howling like a wolf. I had the energy of a wolf. I was all wild and feral like a wolf. And so the wolf was a very, very important symbol or energy in Northern Europe, say like a few hundred years ago, because they were very, very prolific, and that they were a very, very ferocious animal, and so we needed to be very, very careful about the wolf. And so whenever it started to get dark, we needed to be fucking careful. We needed to make sure we were tooled up.
So that kind of creates an imprint then in this.
Yes, and so what I'm saying is
that
when I took the Amanita muscaria, I tapped into the collective unconscious of Northern Europe. If I took Amanita muscaria in Egypt, would I tap into the collective unconsciousness of?
We were talking about this actually on the beach, weren't we?
But would I actually be privy to that collective unconscious, or because of my upbringing, because of my indigenous collective unconsciousness from my ancestors, would I, continue to go into that realm? I think that's more liable, Guy. I think through 1,000 years of the human evolution and the passing on of information, you see, you don't only pass on DNA, you pass on the collective consciousness.
Maybe you pass on the awareness, and to the extent of what that awareness is determines how that energy exists after death, maybe.
Yeah, because look at it like this: throughout thousands of years, the indigenous peoples in Northern Europe have become afraid of the wolf. And so what happens is your DNA, I'm pretty sure, because I've seen videos like this, it attaches this memory of this fear. And this is why, you see, we will get instinctive fear when we see snakes, when we see spiders. Why is that? We've got no reason whatsoever to fear spiders living in Northern Europe. The greatest threat we've got is squishing one and getting these goo on our fingers or whatever. We don't have any poisonous spiders, and so therefore we shouldn't have a fear of spiders in our collective consciousness, but we do, Guy.
Yeah, and my son, for instance, I've never given him a reason to be scared of spiders. I've always nurtured him in that respect, but all of a sudden he develops a fear out of nowhere. So yeah, I get what you're saying there.
So it isn't out of nowhere, it derives from the collective unconscious. And the reason why, you see, these fears are there is because it's the Darwinian aspect of the self-preservation, because it is not only the acquisition of a body that is dexterous and can make fire and use tools and protect ourselves, and this is why repeatedly we derived out of apes, and we stand up right now because it gives us more elevation, and so we can see creatures lurking in the tall grasses of the African plains and this sort of thing. And so when you look at the fears that we've got, particularly about the snake, because that's a very, very important one, and you think, well, okay, yeah, snakes, they bite you, but what's the chances of being bitten by a snake, Guy? They're very, very shy creatures, so they can hear you coming hundreds of meters away, and they will always try to get out of the way. And so it's very, very rare that you're going to get bit by a snake, and yet we carry this innate fear with us.
It's interesting, and to come back to this, you're talking about the guy that wrote the lucid dreaming book, who met his
Robert Waggoner.
Yeah, was it his mother he met?
Yeah.
Well, I met my grandmother, and my grandmother did have a belief in the afterlife, and I watched my grandmother die. And when she died twice. They brought her back the first time, but then she went again, and there was something. It's hard to explain it, but I could see her leave. That's a lot of people seeing that. I could see her leave the body.
Yes,
the energy of what she was left, and something came for it. Like she was observing something. I think she called out. She tried to murmur her mother's name when she died, and that was it. She was gone. Something came. I felt the energy change in the room, just like I felt it on mushrooms. You know, when you get to that peak on mushrooms, where you kind of like in a hyper-tuned, kind of focused, sensitive, hypersensitive state, and you feel kind of a shift in the auric field or the energy, or whatever you want to call it. That happened in the room when my grandmother died, and it wasn't a negative experience. It was it was a layered experience. Like there was a positive aspect behind it. Now, when I met my grandmother in the astral realm, she was surprised to see me. Right? Okay, so she's in this bedroom, surrounded by all the things that she loved. She loved blue ornaments, blue glass.
Yeah, so therefore she carried her
So there's an energy there that it probably existed around her body, for instance, somewhere, so part of her psyche, whatever, that is still existent out in the Akasha. I connect with this, but that's the essence of who she was. And I'm still connecting that with that, and that seems to still exist. And she recognized me, and she grinned, but she looked surprised to see me. Like, she basically was like this, how the fuck did you get here? Have you died?
Yeah.
And I'm like, no, I'm just coming to see you. And I'm doing a bit of practicing, astral projecting and doing all that kind of stuff, And she was absolutely, but my granddad seemed very different when I met him. Now, I met him by accident, and initially I came across a demonic entity who was pretending to be my granddad.
Right.
And he was hunched up in the shower like this. He was all black and blue, his eyes whited over, and he's making all these painful noises. And there's surgical needles stuck in every inch of his body. Now, my granddad suffered very greatly throughout his life with a lot of pain. And I remember saying to this thing, "You are not my granddad. I'm not letting you trick me. This is, this is some satanic bullshit, And all of a sudden, the energy, just like on mushrooms, shifted in the room. And then this presence, not a physical or visual presence like with my grandmother, but this energetic presence was my granddad. It was there.
Right.
And it said, look, don't worry about you not being at the hospital when I died. Don't beat yourself up about it. Everything's fine, basically. But he spoke without words.
Yeah.
And I felt like the conversation, when you have a conversation with somebody and you come to an agreement and you get that feeling everything's agreed.
Yeah.
It was like that without the conversation, and I felt a sense of closure from both of those experiences because I feel that I connected with who my grandmother and my granddad truly were without this biological vehicle. It was the essence of them that still kind of exists in some semblance in this, whatever it is. And that could be just a part of my own mind. Because if I think of my mind as being a collection of all sine and cosine waves, all possible frequencies, all possible things, the mind creates reality, so on and so forth. There's no evidence that anything exists outside of the mind.
Yeah.
So maybe that's where it all comes from. That maybe the mind is much more powerful than we think.
Exactly. Now, in Freudian terms, if we look at what he said about dreams, dreams are a wish fulfillment, and so the unconscious mind will give you in the dream world what you can't attain in the physical world, or what you haven't attained. And so therefore then you can see that our mind is doing this. And so if for instance we have had close members or lovers or whatever die, and then we so miss them, then we will invariably see them in the dream world. Now, you see, I really miss, or I really greatly enjoyed the growing up of my daughter when she was a kid and all the fun stuff we did. And so whenever I dream of my daughter, it is always when she's a kid and we're having fun. I very, very rarely dream of her now as a young woman, 27 years old. And so this is something that we really have to take into consideration when we look at this stuff. Now, when my old man died, my old man had suffered from depression, and he became like a ghoul. He bloated up, his face all sagged. It was like this.
Yeah. I can't see your video, by the way.
Oh, you can't see me, right? Yeah, Skype's fucking up. I think it's only going to record your side, and so. But yeah, his face was all hanging, and he was white as a ghost, and it's all puffy. And so I'd lost my father many years before he actually died, and so within a few months after he died, then I had like this astral projection or a lucid dream. It was absolutely pristine, beautiful, technicolor. And I saw him walking very, very slowly and relaxed, like Jesus. And my old man used to have long, black, curly hair and moustache and beard. And so I saw photos of him when he was about 30 years old. He was a handsome bloke, and he always used to like to wear denim jeans, flares in those days, 70s when he was about this old, and a denim shirt. And I saw this denim-clad old man who had a glowing face, he had a glowing aura, he had a beautiful kind of like Mona Lisa smile on him, and what it was spoken to me was, everything is fine, I'm fine, look at me. And I went, wow, Dad, you look fantastic. And since then, I too had a closure, and I will never ever, and I never have felt anything negative about his passing, because he wanted it to happen. This is why he killed himself, and so he got what he ultimately wanted. Or maybe was it that I got what I ultimately wanted? And this is the thing that we'll probably never ever know, Guy.
Yeah, that's interesting. That I think that, you know, if all time is all possibility, you know, then you connecting with your daughter, for instance, as a younger thing, that energy's there, and maybe the energy there is there right now with your daughter as an old woman. You know, maybe you could connect with that, and it's not even happened yet. You know, and
yeah.
So that there's a question. But yeah, it's all interesting stuff. You know, I'd be interested to see what people say about this video, and if they've got any input on it, and
if anybody wants to come forward and Skype with either one of us,
definitely,
and tell us about their dream experience, astral projections, or anything that's to do with paranormal, because due to the level of experience that we've had, I'm pretty sure that we can shed some light on what it is that they've experienced. And I personally would love an attempt at that, because I find it absolutely fascinating, and I love hearing those stories. So if you've got any guys out there, then shout us up, and you know, we can make a Skype.
Yeah, and I'm going to put out a dream section on the forum for dream experiences, lucid dreams, and astral projections and things. So people can go on there and, you know, and coerce with each other. Coerce.
Communicate.
I keep using that word, don't I? Coerce.
Yeah.
It seems to be there. I don't know. It just pops
sounds
up,
very manipulative.
Yeah, it does. I'm going to coerce you into. Yeah. No, communicate. Yeah. So it's been a long night. I was up last night doing the website till, like, you know, 3 o'clock, and then I got enveloped by a 3 mile high tsunami wave. So yeah, it's been a bit of a rough day today. But yeah, so yeah, thanks for that. Anyway, it's been nice to get a perspective on it, and it's helped me kind of put things into perspective. And I'm going to check out the book that you've said, actually. I'll probably buy that and give it a good read. So
yeah, I think that's one of the best books on the market, and it's that guy. He struck me as having a great deal of experience, and I like what he said and how he depicted it, and so. Yeah, I think if anybody really wants to get into lucid dreaming, then Robert Waggoner is the way forward, as far as I can glean, because he's got some great depictions of the experiences that he's had, and so maybe you can get some sort of relation from those. And so, yeah, this was a brilliant conversation, Guy. Really enjoyed it, and so I'll bang this up at some stage later on today.
Not a problem, not a problem. I was thinking as well, just as a little last top off on this, this is for the viewers out there. Speaking of books and things, there's going to be a lot of reference to books and stuff in a lot of chats in future. So it'd be interesting to, you know, maybe in future, if you guys want to see it, I could add a little page on the website where people can look at the recommended books that we've recommended, and maybe even go on there and purchase them from Amazon or something. So, you know, that's all stuff of, you know, possibilities. You know, it's not something that we have to do.
All recommended, people, not necessarily video posts, because we probably can't remember all the links that we've watched, but we can remember the name. And so if we're speaking on a certain subject, we can say, well, check out this guy, check out that guy, you know, or girl.
Yeah, no problem.
Brilliant.
It's been nice talking, mate. Yeah, no problem.
Yeah. So I'm going to go to the gym now and go about my business and everything. So have a great day, whatever you're doing. I'll talk to you soon, mate.
I'm tattooing today, so I'll catch you soon.
All right, mate.
No worries.
Cheers, Guy. Bye.
Bye.